I'm a parent of a child who was diagnosed as being mildly autistic. And one of the reasons that we chose to come and take Tamata's hearing therapy is because there seemed to be something else that needed to be done. Sally was diagnosed with mild autism when she was about 3 and a half. And we had a lot of speech therapy at that time. And it seemed to me that in spite of the progress made through the speech therapy, that there was a hearing problem as well. But I could never get a proper hearing audiogram. Anytime we asked for a hearing test, it was always whether the child is deaf or whether the child can hear. And I had always assumed that Sally had what I referred to as a hearing dyslexia, that there was some problem with the way she was hearing things. And people, of course, always told me, well, there is no such thing as hearing dyslexia. Dyslexia is an eye problem. And I said, well, there are certain things that Sally seems to be able to hear very well. For instance, she could hear airplanes far in the distance long before anyone else could. But there were certain things like the hairdryer that bothered her immensely, the sound of the hairdryer. She had little oddities in hearing behavior that I felt were not just something that could be cured by a speech therapist. So we bumbled along, and she went through about 1.5 years of sensory integration therapy, which did a lot to cure her tactile defensiveness. And in curing the tactile defensiveness and the balance problems, I found that she became a much more social and talkative person. And the reason I decided was because since she was not bothered by the tactile problems that she had, that she was more able to concentrate on being a real human being. So I thought if there's any way to do anything with her ears, this would be another therapy to go for. I had heard of vision therapy, but she didn't seem to have any vision problems in that sense. We came down and saw Judy Belk, and she was a very human person. It was very nice to deal with a real person instead of a professional in a white coat and a little light up on her forehead. And she gave the idea that if a parent saw something, that there was probably something there. And this, again, was very refreshing instead of the medical attitude that, don't worry, madam, they'll grow out of it, everything's fine. So at that time, Sally was transitioning from 2 years in a developmental kindergarten where she only had 10 children in the class. Her speech and her talking had come around real fine, but she was going to be moving into a first grade class where there were 28 children, a new teacher, a lot of behavior problems, a different school. And I felt that tactilely she was going to be okay, but the hearing would probably still bother her. And what her reaction to hearing problems would be to get stiff and stubborn and not to talk. And this is not conducive to learning. In many kids that I have subsequently seen in the Tomatis therapy, you can look at the child and you look in their eyes and you know someone is in there, and you just feel bad that they can't get out. You know that there's a real human thinking person in there. They're not retarded. There's just some sort of a barrier, and whether it's hearing or balance or vision or whatever, this is their screen. This is their little cage. In the Tomatis therapy that Judy Belk practices, there is an all-encompassing thing. She first tests the child with an audiogram and finds out where the problems are. She explains a little bit about the connection between hearing and balance, which is very important. And the thing that I found very interesting after the testing was that she said that in Sally's left ear, she was very sensitive to higher frequencies. In her right ear, the bone conduction of sound and the air conduction of sound did not mesh, so she was hearing garbled through her right ear, which should have been her dominant ear, and she was extremely sensitive on her left ear. This, to me, made a lot of sense. This explains why somebody would be sensitive to different frequencies where they can still hear. So we started the therapy, and Sally wore the earphones for about 2 hours a day for 3 days a week. We now are on the second stage of the therapy where we're doing it 5 days a week. I began to see different changes in this 7-year-old child within the first 3 days, and it was very exciting. First, I want to explain that the Center for Communication Therapy is not a formal-looking place. It's very inviting. There are toys in the room for the child to play with. They don't have to sit they don't have to sit like they're in a little fishbowl or something. There are pictures on the wall. There are books for parents to read, books for children to read. There are, at the time we were there were kittens to play with. There were, the lighting was adjustable. Everything was made in a sensory fashion. Everything was made as nice as could be for both the child and the parent. The parent also is allowed to listen to the same thing the child is listening to. The kinds of changes that I saw were a catching up in social and other and physical things that Sally had missed during the years of ages 2 to 4, when she had just kind of faded out or gone on hold. She seemed to go through the terrible twos after about 2 or 3 sessions. Then she came out of them. She seemed to go into the asking why. There were a lot of fascinating things with questions. Initially, when Sally was seeing a speech therapist, she had echolalia, and she would not. This was triggered by asking questions, especially where or what and how. These questions, instead of triggering a response, would just trigger an echo. She began to use, not only to answer those questions, she began to ask questions. It was very exciting for the 2-week period that we went through. There were several things that she did for the first time in her life. The asking how things happen, the asking why, kind of an increased sense of time and space. Up until this point, she had been, to an extent, a loving child, but kind of a little cardboard loving child. And she began to ask questions like, where did your kitty come from? Where was the cat before you had her? A sense of where things came from. Another important thing, of course, I was doing a lot of crying at the time. We were going through a lot of family tensions. And she asked, she started to say, and then she said, where do tears come from why do tears come from? She was looking to find out the personal reason for things. The whole aspect of treating people as human beings as opposed to things, the personal level started coming through. Another very exciting thing to me was one time when we were playing on the front porch, and we were about halfway through the therapy, and she was playing with my ear and pinching it and wrapping a string around it. And for the very first time in her life, she said, "Does that hurt?" And the whole idea that something might hurt someone else the way things were hurting her was just, it's just enough to take your breath away. I'm trying to think, there were about 4 major things she did for the first time. There were tactile things that she did that were very exciting. We were walking along. Again, this child was one who wouldn't wash her hands. She wouldn't like her hair played with. You'd give her a hug and she'd tense away. For the first time in her life, she held my hand. She chose to hold my hand palm to palm, whereas she would always, when you'd hold her hand, she would either have her thumb in or she would just hold you in a kind of a little cup shape. But she just held palm to palm. It was very exciting. I talked with another mom that first week, and I said, well, certain things are kind of showing up, but they don't seem related to hearing. And the mom said, tell Judy, these are very important things. There are all kinds of things that will show up Um, so I mentioned them to Judy, and she made a point of not telling me what to expect, just to say any different things that came up, whether they be emotional or social or hearing or anything. She said, just mention them, and these may be significant things. So I'd say, well, gosh, it seems strange, but she's enjoying playing with fuzzy toys now. She never liked playing with fuzzy toys. She liked playing with little cars and things that were smooth and streamlined as opposed to fuzzy. And now she's doing more fuzzy toy play. She was getting more cuddly. She was looking for hugs more, a lot more eye contact. The kinds of things would be that you could see a kind of devilish sense coming out in her. There was more a sense of joy in being a human being. It was kind of like, gosh, something has been taken away that's been bothering me for so long. I can open up a little bit. She used to be very, again, sensitive with having her fingernails cut. And it just floored me one day when she came and she said, I've got a hangnail on my toe, can you cut it off? And it's kind of like someone who just doesn't like to be touched or doesn't like a particular food, all of a sudden asking for that food. It's, you're stunned by this. Her teacher had said she probably would have trouble reading or with math because of the lack of sequencing. I had assumed maybe there would be an attention deficit problem. She not only picked up on reading and phonics and mathematics in developmental kindergarten, but she developed through the hearing therapy a sense of sequencing of time and place, sequencing in her own personal development, as well as the way things operate, the way things go, why morning is morning and night is night. She developed, whereas she used to cover my mouth when I'd sing her lullabies and things, and she'd say, don't sing, Mommy. She began to hum and sing on her own. I caught her singing after she had, coming down here to therapy. Gosh, I've forgotten the other thing already now. She began to be able to explain some of her own behaviors. She used to have certain standoffish behaviors, and for some reason when you'd compliment her, she would go and make different animal noises. And this was more or less an autistic thing that she carried on, a kind of an animalistic thing. And I finally said, can you tell me why you do that after we had the hearing therapy? And she said, well, it means I don't like that, or I don't like to hear that. So being able to explain her own behaviors was for me a very important thing, because you have a kid and you know there's someone in there and they can't tell you either what's wrong or what hurts or what bothers them. And to me, having gone through the Tomatis therapy, which integrates sensory integration therapy and all the good things, it meant that my child was able to help me to understand how to help her better. And this is the thing that all the parents need, is to know how to help their own kid.